Well, good evening and welcome to this evening's program brought to you by the Columbia Fiction Foundry. As many of you know, Columbia Fiction Foundry is a writing community, and our focus is basically helping each other become better writers of fiction. We hold workshops every month and occasional programs like this one this evening. Our membership is open to any graduate of Columbia University who has an interest in writing fiction. This evening program is particularly relevant to all of us, I believe, because it's about something we've all encountered or thought about, how to get out of the slush pile. And we're extremely fortunate to have someone with us tonight who can really impart quite a bit of wisdom about this topic. Because Dawn Raffel has worked both sides of the fence, both as a gatekeeper and a writer. And she spends a lot of time in contact with the agents and the editors who are trying to decide what acquisitions they want to make and who, because they're often overwhelmed with submissions, are looking really for what submissions they can eliminate. Dawn's credentials include having worked, in fact, helped launch O magazine, that's Oprah's magazine, and she served there as a senior editor. She's edited several literary magazines, most recently Northwest Review. Uh, she's also been a judge of many writing literary contests, including at the New York Public Library and at the Center for Fiction. She's taught writing at the Center for Fiction and at Columbia University. And Dawn is a mentor for emerging writers, both at the Center for Fiction and at AWP, which is the Association of Writers and Writing Programs. Dawn also works as a developmental editor, uh, and she's the author of of six books, three fiction and three nonfiction. Her most recent novel is Boundless as the Sky. Uh, I'm sure that Dawn's presentation will generate a lot of questions. Please put your questions in the Q&A. We will get to as many as we can within the next hour. Uh, and I think at this point, Dawn, please tell us, how do we get out of that slush pile?
Okay, thank you. First of all, thanks for inviting me here. I'm really happy to be here with you. And like I said, I've been on both sides of this transaction, both as a writer and an editor. And over the years, I've been in situations where I had to go through a lot of submissions quickly and make decisions. And I really started to think about how can I help writers to understand what it looks like on the other side of the transaction and how to give yourself the best chance when the odds are sometimes steep. So, first of all, I am going to see how well I can do on sharing my slideshow with you. So here it goes. Stop two. Okay, did we succeed?
That looks good.
Okay, good. So, how to get out of the slush pile. So, first of all, we have a tendency to think that the agent or the editor has all the power. We kind of think they're sitting in a cushy, powerful place. But the reality is they're actually under a lot of pressure, and we don't always see that. So, for example, an agent is rarely a self-employed agent. They're working for an agency. They're under a lot of pressure to make a profit. They're under a lot of pressure to bring prestige to the agency. So, profit and prestige, and two kinds of currency in publishing. They're worried about are they going to get laid off during the next culling? Same with editors at big publishing houses. On the other hand, if we're talking about, say, a great nonprofit press, and it might be a press that doesn't require representation, but the editor of that press is, I guarantee you, spending half of their time running around raising money. They're worrying about keeping the lights on. If it's a literary magazine that you're pitching to, again, they're probably volunteers. They have another job. If the first person reading your work is an assistant or an intern, they're worried about pleasing their boss. So they got a lot of stuff on their mind, and they have a tremendous number of submissions coming in. Even at some place like the Northwest Review, which was a good literary magazine. It's not the New Yorker or the Paris Review. It's a solid literary magazine. We would close submittable when we hit 1,000 submissions, which sometimes took just a couple of weeks. And there might be, it's a quarterly magazine, there might be two stories in that issue, and one of them might be a writer we solicited. So what can make you stand out a little bit here? Because presumably you're all competent, polished writers. So I like to call it thing one and thing two. We've got the aspect of it that's art or your manuscript. And then there's commerce, how to sell it. So since you're all Columbia graduates, I'd rather talk about art. That's what we're here for. But we have to do a little bit of commerce first. Now, um, of course, your manuscript is the most important thing. And we're going to talk about what makes an agent or editor keep reading. But the question for today even becomes what makes an agent or an editor start reading? Because we all know we're dealing with email and submittable, which on the one hand make it easy to make a submission. On the other hand, it means the numbers of submissions that are coming in are absolutely tremendous. So how do you even get them to not just keep reading, but start reading? All right, so I have to bring in the P word, which is platform. And I will be honest, I have heard agents and editors at big houses say that they're not even interested unless the author has a platform of literally several 100,000 followers on social media. So that can happen. It's more prevalent with nonfiction than fiction. But, when a writer says, well, I have a website or I have 5,000 friends on Facebook, that doesn't really mean a lot to them. They're looking for, in that universe, they're looking for a couple 100,000 on social, or they're looking for a subscription newsletter with 100,000 subscribers, or they're looking for a very popular podcast or Substack. This might be something you're good at and love to do. And if you are, go for it. Because actually, there are people who are great at it and they love it. And so it's just something to keep in mind that there are agents who are simply, they're looking for this. There are also agents and editors out there who don't need that. But then how do you catch their eye? So, of course, we have to talk about personal connections and visibility. I think it took me too long to disabuse myself of the idea that using connections was somehow cheating. I certainly am not somebody who was born with any connections in the literary world. Um, but we start to begin to make them because if you have a personal connection to an agent or an editor, um, it's not going to get you a yes necessarily, but at least it's going to get you a chance. It'll get you a fairer reading. Maybe they'll spend a little more time thinking about it. And so some things you can do, and I'm sure you know about these conferences, writers' colonies, if you're able to get in, writers' groups, readings, lit mags, putting yourself out there, starting to become part of the literary community where honestly, you just never know who you're going to meet and where a conversation can lead you. And again, literary citizenship, like if you can find a way to review books if you don't have previous publications, be a reader for a literary journal. tutor underserved kids in creative writing in an after-school program, things like that in your cover letter. And you say to me that you're serious about this and you're part of this community. And I'm going to take a moment more to look at your work. Maybe I will read it first myself if I'm the acquiring agent or editor rather than asking my intern to take first look. All of these things can help. And really take a moment to personalize your pitch. So I think we all kind of get this idea. I'm going to just throw as many words against the wall and see what sticks. So, you go onto Query Tracker or something and you send the same letter to 50 agents at the same time. But the reality is that as the recipient, when you're getting a form letter where all they've done is change the name. So if there's anything you can do, even if you've never met the person, to say, I'd love to be represented by this agency because I know you represent such and such book, which I just loved. Or you've never met the person, but I saw you on a podcast and I loved what you had to say about publishing. But anything that remember, it's always a person at the other end of the transaction, and they'd like to know that you have some interest in working with them as opposed to getting published anywhere. Okay, so let's say you've caught their eye and they've started to read. Whether they've asked you for a sample chapter or the first 50 pages or the whole manuscript, the reality is they're going to make a snap decision because they have to, because they're overwhelmed by manuscripts. So you're going to have to get them hooked in the first page or two, or they're not going to continue reading. And although that seems unfair, when you read at volume, you get very discerning at whether somebody is in prospect of being somebody who you're going to work with. So I could ask you, how long do you need to listen to somebody sing to know whether you like their voice? Or how long do you need to watch somebody dance to know whether they can move? You don't need to spend that long with a manuscript to know whether you start to feel some affinity with this narrative voice and whether you want to keep reading. If we were in a creative writing class, which I teach, I always say that as a writer, you have two big bears. So you're going to look at that and you're going to say, wait, there's three bears. And there are. So there's, as a writer, You've got sentence making and you've got structure. And bear number 3 is self-doubt. That's another thing. And in terms of your sample or what the agent is reading and making a decision about, or the editor, it's really sentence making. Structure, we'll say, is more like plot or narrative arc. And that's very important as well. But what you see at the beginning is sentence making. And I would argue that character and setting and all kinds of things that people are looking for, if you're a literary artist, they issue out of sentence making. It's what you've got going for you that somebody working in another storytelling medium doesn't have. For instance, somebody working in film or somebody working in audio, but you have something as a literary artist on the page. What happens when you start reading at volume is what you start to see is what I will call, is not moving, the curse of competence. So the vast majority of submissions, some of them are awful and there's just nothing to be done about it, but a lot of them are really actually pretty good. There's a lot of people out there with MFAs. There's a lot of thoughtful people. There's a lot of people who maybe haven't taken an MFA, but they've taken some workshops and they have some beta readers and they've gotten some good feedback. And so I wouldn't sit there and say, well, there's 10 things wrong with this manuscript. It's competent, it's fine, but it's not knockout. It's not going to get you the one slot I have available with 1,000 submissions. So This is a little piece that I wrote a while ago for the Center for Fiction. And since you're not here in person and I can't give you a handout, I'm going to go through it quickly. So, this is the literary puzzle. Inboxes all over the world are filled virtually bursting, and yet editors and agents frequently lament in private that rather than facing an embarrassment of riches, they don't see enough that excites them. So, why is that? Are all those submissions awful? No, they're not. Not at all. At least half of what's in the slush pile is actually really pretty good. If we were in a workshop, I could point to lots of great things. The writers aren't guilty of purple prose or point of view lapses or glaring cliches of language or thought. They're serious minded and often ambitious. They've probably been to a workshop or two. They've learned some writing rules. The work is competent. And that's the problem. Competency is not enough. So instead of a yes, you get a politely evasive rejection email that leaves you really confused and frustrated, or you get ghosted altogether. You know what? Actually, nobody enjoys saying no. So sometimes people just don't bother to say no, they just don't answer you. And that's even more frustrating. And I've spent a long time on the receiving end of it as well. So tempting as it may be, the solution is not to try to grab an editor's attention, though, with a shocking premise. People try to do that. The slush pile contains plenty of stories and novels like that, and for the most part, they seem desperate. And besides, there's very little that's shocking anymore. So, what exactly is the winning ticket? If you ask an agent or an editor, they might tell you that they look for voice above all or that character is paramount. Even more exasperatingly, they might say they're looking for that certain spark, which, in the words of an old professor of mine who deplored any lack of clarity, what the hell does that mean? Well, now that I've put in several decades of editing and writing and book reviewing, I've come to believe that underlying all of these good things that editors and readers say they desire, which is voice, character, insight, presence on the page, and that blasted spark, lies a single attribute, which is precision in sentence making. An unforgettable narrative voice issues out of granular precision. The writer has paid attention to every syllable and inflection. An indelible character is one whose particularities are so finely drawn as to defy any known label. Even a 1,000-page novel of big ideas and panoramic sweep owes its greatness to the precision of its insights, its language, its composition, its willingness to say no to the prevailing wisdom that most of us take as a given. The X factor that distinguishes a piece of writing that is competent from one that's compelling isn't raw talent. That's the good news and the bad news. There's nothing congenital or magical about it. I'm convinced that almost anyone can learn. The critical ingredient is the determination to interrogate every choice, every word, every quirk, and every assumption about the way the world works. It takes patience and practice and nerve. It's also enormously satisfying. And if you persist in doing it honestly, painstakingly, and courageously, someone is going to notice. And the someone might not be the editor-in-chief of Simon and Schuster. It might be a great literary press, but I promise you, someone is going to notice. In the end, once you actually get somebody to agree to look at your work, to read your work, it's really the excitement of the sentence making that will get them in. And then it may turn out the plot falls apart and there's more work to do. You know, it still doesn't mean you're going to get a yes, but it means they're going to keep reading because really what they're asking is, do I want to spend time in the company of this narrative voice? And I used to sometimes say, you know, as an editor, I can fix mistakes, but I can't edit in life when it isn't there. And by mistakes, usually that means like plot holes, continuity problems, um, issues where there's a structural problem. It's harder to fix something where there's a sentence making problem or a voice making problem because an editor can't create that for you. This is a quote I love from Italo Calvino. Everything can change, but not the language that we carry inside us, like a world more exclusive and final than one's mother's womb. So we're actually moving close to 7:30. I had some examples, and I'm going to go through really quickly of just like openers that to me seem like they would just grab me by the throat and I'm not going to be able to stop reading. And not everybody is going to agree either. It's subjective. But just real quick to look at a couple of strategies. So since we were talking about Italo Calvino, this is Invisible Cities, and he starts out with leaving there and proceeding for 3 days toward the east. You reach Diamira, a city with 60 silver domes, bronze statues of all the gods, streets paved with lead, a crystal theater, a golden cock that crows each morning on a tower. This is actually in translation also. Um, but it's audacious because there's no throat clearing at all. He starts with leaving there and proceeding for 3 days toward the east. It's so utterly confident. It's daring. Um, it's very carefully thought out, and it's saying, hey, catch up with me. Let me grab you by the hand and pull you through the fun house. This is the beginning of Interior Chinatown by Charles Yu, which won a National Book Award for fiction. And it starts out again, it's formalistically Act One, generic Asian man, interior Golden Palace. Ever since you were a boy, you've dreamed of being Kung Fu guy. You are not Kung Fu guy. You are currently background Oriental male, but you've been practicing. Maybe tomorrow will be the day. Those are just a few sentences. Um, you just grab me by the heart. I'm not going to be able to quit there. Carmen Maria Machado, and this is from a story collection. Afterward, there is no kind of quiet like the one that is in my head. Again, it's the sentence making. There's nothing really extraordinary occurring there in terms of plot. It's the afterword. It's the like, of course you're with me. Cormac McCarthy. Um, some of you may have seen an article that was circulating all over the place that was contending that, Cormac McCarthy was a phenomenon that couldn't happen now because he wrote several books that were published by Random House that lost money. And I would say, probably, unfortunately, that publisher wouldn't have continued to keep publishing books that lost money, but somebody would have. He would have ended up somewhere. And you see this one, see the child. It opens with a directive. And then it's music, it's cadence, it's rhythm. See the child. He is pale and thin. He wears a thin and ragged linen shirt. He stokes the scullery file. Outside lie dark turned fields with rags of snow and darker fields beyond that harbor yet a few last wolves. You've got place. You've got danger. You've got a directive. You've got the repetition and the cadence of poetry. You're in.
Hmm.
This is the beginning of Their Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. Ships at a distance have every man's wish on board. Again, music. For some, they come in with the tide. For others, they sail forever on the horizon, never out of sight, never landing until the watcher turns his eyes away in resignation. His dreams mocked to death by time. That is the life of men. Now, women forget all those things they don't want to remember and remember everything they don't want to forget. He is the truth. Then they act and do things accordingly. So the beginning of this was a woman, and she had come back from burying the dead. the musicality and the speed from which she moves from the macro just to the earthiest thing you can imagine, the broad statement that's also kind of kick-ass, right into like getting down in the earth and burying the dead. Last one. Um, Ro is at the kitchen sink, peeling furiously away at a carrot when she draws her first blood of the day, and of course it's non-metaphoric and her own. A sudden blossoming of color in the drab plot of one ordinary afternoon. So there we're acknowledging the fiction. You're actually acknowledging the artifice, and you're saying, hey, come along, I'm going to play with you. Let's have fun together. Look, these are just a couple of examples, and I went through very fast because I want to have time for questions. You're not going to write like any of these people because you're going to write like you. So I often, ask when I have students 3 questions. Are you writing the story that only you can tell? And are you writing it the way only you can tell it? And do you have the courage to keep going? It's that just that bold and precise and unique to you sentence making that really makes a work stand out. And it's not something anybody gives you easily. It's something that gets honed over time. So once you've written and you've finished your manuscript and you're in that moment of euphoria and you think it's ready to send out to an agent or an editor, pause. Do not send it out right away because you're in an altered state of mind. And even if your peer group and your writing group tells you it's great, just pause. You've spent so long on this. You've probably worked on it for years. You've lived with it for even longer in your head. Let it sit for at least a couple weeks and come back to it. And you're going to see things that you missed because you're not going to get a second chance with this. You have one chance to make a first impression. So just give yourself the gift of some time to just let it sit, do nothing, and come back to it. Couple more P's since we had the platform. It's persistence. So it really does sometimes take a long time. It takes persistence and it takes patience. And again, persistence doesn't mean wildly submitting to 100 people at once. It means take time to develop relationships, seeing who you think you might want to work with, um, pitching people carefully and thoughtfully and personally when you can, and also understanding sometimes that um, sometimes a seed takes a long time to grow in terms of a relationship. And sometimes the nice rejection that you got 5 years later turns into an acceptance for, and it might be for something different. It doesn't mean keep sending back the same thing, but it is a long game. Simplest rule of sales, going back to commerce again, is just I came from a retail family. People like buying from people they like. So again, be a good literary citizen. And for heaven's sake, if you publish in a literary magazine, remember to thank your editor, who might be an intern now, or might be a literary magazine editor, and might be an editor at a big publishing house in 3 years. You just never know. Um, be gracious to work with so that you get another chance. Again and again, what I saw sometimes were young writers who weren't necessarily the most talented, but they were wonderful to work with. And what that meant was that they got another opportunity and another opportunity and another opportunity. And from all those opportunities, they got better and they grew because they had the chance to write, they had the chance to work with editors. And I will often say to writers, nice is the death of art. You don't have to be nice on the page. Margaret Atwood is not nice on the page. You don't think of her that way. Toni Morrison, like that, they're powerful. You don't have to have nice characters, but basically, just be nice to the people you work with in the publishing world. If somebody sends you a rejection, it's astonishing to me that people do this, but don't send back a rebuttal. You know,
Hmm.
word gets around. Um, Again, the editors and the agents are, you forget, but they're people too, and they have their own problems and their own pressures. And there was another situation where I was at Oprah and I used to buy book excerpts, and there was one pretty famous person, you would recognize the name, and she had a book, and we did an excerpt. And she was a nightmare to work with. She made my life hell, and I wasn't the only one. And a couple years later, the rights agent from the publisher came back to me, but she has a new book. And I said, you know what? Life is too short. No. And I could tell from the weariness in the rights agent's voice that she was getting this response all over town. So, um, nobody is too big that they can get away with being a jerk for a long time. Be nice. And this is a quote that I love. Um, it's from Gabriela Mistral, who is a Chilean. She was a Nobel laureate. Um, the story of the world dies when the storyteller gives up the ghost. So persist. We live in a world where there's a lot of competition, and we're dealing with AI, and we're dealing with corporate mergers and acquisitions, but persist because you know you're doing this because you love this. And I really do believe, in spite of all of this, in spite of all of the conversations about platforms and the difficulty of numbers and getting somebody's attention, I do believe that um, the good work rises in one way or another, and not always the most expected way, but it finds its place in the world, and it finds its readers in the world. And so I will now open this up to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Dawn, for that wisdom and really expressed in your own unique voice, this combination of having been a gatekeeper at various times in your career and a writer and a teacher. So I think all of that together combined to really um, give us a unique and a useful um, um, explanation of ways we can actually try to get out of the slush pile um, uh, by being competent, but more than competent and being nice. Um, so, folks, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. I'm going to start off with a couple of questions here. Um, well, I'm waiting. I see one question coming up, but one question. I know there are a lot of folks uh, who are writing not necessarily literary fiction, but writing mysteries or other genre fiction. This idea that you were talking about, this granular precision and the importance of sentences, do you think that applies across the board to all different kinds of fiction?
I do. Yes, I do. I think it does apply to different genres. I mean, ultimately, you also need structure, right? So you need your great, especially with a mystery, you need your great plot. You need to be terrific at plot as well. But you need to get the reader in the door with the sentence making and the voice. Now, there could be stuff that's real kind of mass market genre, and there you're going to be more dependent on structure and plot. But I feel like the sentence making issue is really important. And if you think about um, your favorite mystery novels, the ones you love to read, um, it isn't just plot. They have a precision and a voice, and they tell you something about human nature.
Okay. Um, this question sort of has to do with your idea, your point about being civilized, a nice person. Um, if you send out the query letter and it's sort of going, you think it's going into the void, Should you be following up? Is there a time frame in which you should or shouldn't follow up?
I think it's fine to follow up, and I wouldn't wait that long because I think things just disappear. It kind of it depends because sometimes they might tell you how long you can wait before
Hmm.
following up. Um, I don't think it hurts. I mean, I followed up with people and they just lost it. We all do. I mean, the email and things used to come in the snail mail, and it's overwhelming. I don't think there's anything wrong with I don't think anybody has ever said, "Oh, how dare you follow up? Now I'm going to reject you because you did that."
Okay. Um, this person says, my novel is a historical mystery, uh, yet mystery editors say it's not a mystery. Historical editors say the novel is not a historical novel. Calling it a hybrid seems to be the kiss of death. Please advise. So it's sort of, you know, between genres. It doesn't seem to be an obvious fit one way or the other.
Maybe the category thing can be really frustrating, but maybe it can just be a novel. Maybe it's just a literary novel, a general novel, where it doesn't have to be specifically categorized as historical or, I mean, many just literary novels have elements of both mystery and history in them.
Hmm. Hmm. Um, do you have any recommendations on how to escape the third bear? It runs fast. State again what the third bear was. You had two bears and then you
Self-doubt, yeah.
self-doubt. Yeah, yeah, yeah. The self-doubt bear. Okay. Well,
Self-doubt is there. And so, I talk a lot about, when I teach, I talk a lot about self-care, like because the, um, the self-doubt is a hard one. And too often creative people, and I guess we're all creative, you see writers who end up with drinking and substance abuse because it's really hard to deal with. That's not constructive either. And I feel like just, part of persistence is you have to do whatever you have to do and to take care of yourself in the long run. So self-care and, something that's not staring at a screen. And for you, it could be running, or it could be swimming, or it could be yoga. But I feel like that is helpful for self. It never fully goes away. I mean, that's part of it. I worry about the people who think their work is perfect and don't ever doubt anything. Um, but that self-doubt is something that it also was really helpful to have community and have people who can help you support your work and people who you can lean on a little bit and when you feel like you're getting a lot of rejections.
okay. So the community theme extended all
Community,
over.
both
Yeah.
community and self-care, and you're making this sustainable because the reality is also you could have a first novel that's a big hit. And then you still have, like, now what do you do? There's a second novel. Like, everybody has a lot of ups and downs in their careers. This is something where if you're going to be a writer, rejection is baked into it. You know, it's just part of what you're going to have to accept as part of the package. So you are going to face rejection. It's not like you published one book and you'll never be rejected again. It doesn't work that way. Or you might, publish the second book and now the critics have decided it's time to take you down a notch, or you're no longer the flavor of the month. Um, and then you're going to come back again. So you want to be doing this over the long haul. This is something you really want to have a lifetime of a creative career. And you want to build into your life, um, all the things that help you make it sustainable, which are relationships and community and friendships and habits that nurture you.
Thank you. Another question. So, how do editors feel about debut novels written in first person? I seem to recall that ages ago this was discouraged.
I actually think no, it is not discouraged anymore at all. First of all, anybody who makes sweeping generalizations, I'm wary. But sometimes you see this on Twitter, like somebody says, don't ever write this way or don't ever write that way. It works if it works. But I, I actually have also been hearing that people like first person now, and I
Mm,
think it has to do with social media that we've become so used to and addicted to reading little stories on social media and little narratives on social media that
mm,
first person has become quite popular. But I also feel like write the book the way you need to write it.
mhm. The next question goes back to your point about granular precision. And the question is, when you say sentence making, do
Mhm.
you mean precise like the way a poet is? I wonder if that would be hard to sustain for a novel. Would sentences in the sparse style of, say, Murakami be accepted, or is it only accepted because it's in translation?
I think it is hard to sustain. That's part of it, but
Yeah.
I I think it's great. I mean, you see precision all the way through. Well, Calvino was in translation. I'll take that back. You see precision all the way through Charles Yu. You see precision all the way through Cormac McCarthy. If you see a great book, you see a certain kind of precision. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's very spare and poetic. Um, but that, I mean, that's also the hard part. Sometimes you see books that start off great and then the writer starts to get a little sloppy. But if you think about the really terrific books that you've read recently, um, I mean, actually, so right now, I'm reading a narrative nonfiction book that I think everybody else read several years ago, but I'm behind the times. But I'm reading Killers of the Flower Moon. And
Mm.
in this, and I mean, one hell of a story and reporting, but the precision in his writing style is remarkable. And he's sustaining it all the way through. And it's not necessarily fancy prose, but it's very clear and precise.
Um, Thank you. Another question. When you shared about some editors being concerned about platform, can you elaborate more on what an ideal platform looks like?
I think the ideal platform keeps changing as
Mm,
publishers are trying to figure out how to survive. And so, you know, but as of now, I think they look at TikTok or they like, more nonfiction, I would say, if you have a podcast. Um, a lot of follow, a big reach somewhere. If you're, again, if you're a popular speaker at events, and again, that's probably more nonfiction, but if you have a lot of social media, if you have a very popular Substack that people are following.
mhm,
But another thing I don't think is I've also heard editors say um, they're interested in um, writers who they think are in prospect of winning an award, winning a prestigious literary award. And that's where that sentence making comes in too, you know? So that's the other, like, I sometimes feel like writers will, agents and editors will say, like, I'm looking for voice, or I'm looking for thrillers, or I'm looking for underrepresented voices, or
mhm,
honestly, they're really saying, I'm looking to make money. I'm looking to win awards, you know,
mhm,
and I'm looking for significance. So,
mhm,
they want to keep their job. They have to make money. They also want the prestige of winning awards. And they also want to, they're in it because they want to discover somebody new and exciting. They want to do something that has significance also. So that other piece besides the platform isn't doable for everybody. It's not doable for me. I know people who are great at it and they love it and they enjoy doing it. And you're lucky if that's you. It isn't me. And
Mm.
winning the big awards is probably not going to be me either at this point. It isn't. But there's also a world of literary publishers as well who are a little more interested in the manuscript side of it, the
Mhm.
art side of it, than the commerce
Mhm.
side.
Mhm. And I think I would go there with the next question because you've really discussed a very broad industry. It's not all the top five. Could you talk a little bit about the independent or indie press and sort of how that breaks down and how you have to look at it and assess each individual publisher?
Yeah, you do. So there's a world of independent presses. There are some that are really like big independent presses. So you think of something like Grey Wolf, which is an independent press, um, but it's big. And I'm sure you need an agent to approach them. Um, if you've ever gone to AWP, if you've ever gone to the book fair, or if you've ever gone to the CLMP book fair, which I think is in New York, you'll see that there's also a world of smaller presses and they vary, and some of them are kind of crappy, and some of them publish wonderful books. And it is an investment in time to go to a book fair, look around. When I was looking for a smaller press, you know, you go to AWP and spent a little money to buy a bunch of books from them and kind of
Hmm.
see what their books look like, see how they're produced, see if they're nicely designed, because for me that matters. I don't want to have a cheap looking book.
Hmm. Hmm.
See if you can get a sense of whether their books are thoughtfully edited, whether you feel an affinity for this press, because it's also not just about them saying yes to you, it's about you feeling comfortable in a situation with you're in a relationship with this editor that you feel comfortable with them, you feel like they get you, you trust them. They are, one hopes, going to help you make your book better because you're going to be working with them. So it is an investment of time to actually take a look at these small presses, see what they're publishing. And, it goes without saying, buy books, read books, get books out of the library. You are, um, again, you want to get a sense of who's publishing what.
And continuing on along this continuum of ways to be published, can you perhaps talk a little bit about your views on self-publishing, especially in relationship to platforms?
Um, I think self-publishing is tricky. Well, first of all, um, I still think that if you are in academia in some way or have a certain institutional affiliation, self-publishing will be
Mm.
problematic for you. I
Mm.
think that if you're in academia, they're really going to want to see that you have a publisher, even if it's a
Mm.
small publisher,
Mm.
as
Mm.
opposed to
Mm.
self-publishing. Um, I think that in some circles there remains a stigma about it. Um, I've also seen people self-publish where they basically have created a name of a press, so it doesn't look self-published. It's
Ah,
the
right.
Treehouse Press or something like that, and they're the only people it publishes. If you self-publish, you're not going to get reviews. Reviews are hard to get.
Mm. Mhm. Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
but I think you can successfully self-publish if you are absolutely phenomenal at self-promotion, if you have a
Mhm.
platform. And I would also say probably literary fiction might be the hardest one with self-publishing. I think with genre, there's more of a market for that.
Mhm.
It's harder I would think it's harder to get self-published literary fiction off the ground.
And along the same lines of looking at their options for being published, what is your opinion about university presses now that they are accepting novels?
Yeah, so university presses can be an absolutely great way to go. There's like University of West Virginia Press is one that's accepting really terrific fiction. I think University of Wisconsin, a bunch of them, they're a really solid option. There are also our hybrid presses, and there's
Mhm.
a range there too. So one of the better ones is She Writes Press, which it's just women, but
Hmm. Hmm.
there again, there's a fee, but there's also curation. And so I would say they are respected. So there's that option too.
Yeah, and in fact, one of our Columbia Fiction Foundry members, Jennifer Sears, just had a book of short stories published by University of Iowa Press. So it's great that
I
there's
know her.
another
Yeah.
possibility there.
Yeah.
Um, when we talk about connecting, being good citizenship, good literary citizens, being out there, I have a sort of here an etiquette question. So you're at an AWP conference or one of these conferences, you're at a cocktail reception, there's an opportunity to meet an agent there. Is that when you do your pitch, or is that when you uh, talk like a human being and make an appointment to do your pitch at another time? How does that actually work?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any one answer. I think my
Yeah.
inclination would be to talk like a human being. I
Hmm.
mean, whatever you do, don't shove your manuscript in somebody's face. And I've had that happen. I've had people do that. You know, I've actually had people follow me into the ladies' room with a manuscript. Like, do not do that. Um, I would try more to kind of talk like a human being.
Okay. Okay. So that seems to be, part of it is walking around with what we were talking about, the self-doubt and anxiety of being a writer, and the other part is to try to manage that and act like a human being, because as you said, the person on the other side is desperately trying to act like a human being, even though that person might be sending out a lot of rejections. Um, I guess thoughts on the part of the bottom line, or perhaps the bottom line here is that it really comes down to what you said is sentence making. That if we want to get out of the slush pile, some of the editorial stuff is our easier fixes, structure. Sentence making isn't. So if we want to be better sentence makers, what advice would you have?
A lot of it just comes out of doing the work.
Hmm.
Not real easy. I mean, I think writing workshops can be very helpful or writing groups, peer groups like that. Reading your work out loud.
Hmm.
And it just comes from doing the work. too.
Hmm. Okay, well, I think most of the people listening are doing the work and are doing the workshops, and I suppose a class would be another
Yeah,
option.
it comes over. I mean, I know because I've had people say like, "Oh, how do you get voice?" And it's
Mm,
Hmm. That's a hard one. And I don't want to say that structure isn't important. It is. It's another thing we got to work on. But the
mhm,
first thing I'll see, if you sent me a sample and I start reading it, I'm not really going to see the structure right away. I'm going to see
mhm.
something's at stake. And you might have sent me a little synopsis so I have an idea that, this is a murder mystery or this is this. But I kind of want to know, like, do I want to spend time reading this? You know, do I want to spend time in the company of this narrative voice?
Okay, okay. Uh, And that seemed to be a connecting theme with this narrative voice and also with this individual. So to be you don't have to be nice in your writing, but at least to be nice in your personal relationships. Probably last question here. Thank you for your advice. I was an engineering student, but I also like to write. I'm from Hong Kong. This is the beginning of a story I'm calling Writing. Could you tell if it attracts your attention? Oh, I mean, this is, I'll have to read this. I guess this is a question of do these sentences work? Under the bridge of Ferry Street, Yoma Tai, a weak, skinny old woman, was looking for a leftover syringe on the floor. She was over her 70s, but her right arm was as dexterous as a celebrity pianist. It was at midsummer dusk, but her body was shaking numbly as if she was in deep winter. She had no fear of sexuality transmitted disease and tried to reuse the syringe by inserting the needle in a bottle with a label cocaine. Hard putting you on the spot. I think it would be, you really have to see that. It's hard when I'm
I
reading
do
it to
have to
you.
see that, but
Yeah,
I actually do have, we're going to put my website in the
yeah,
chat. There's a contact page there.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
I already have some thoughts, but what I will do is why don't you just send that to my website,
Yeah.
whoever that was, and I will personally answer you.
Okay, so we have one other quick question here. Do you read the Columbia thesis anthology that comes out every year? And do you attend any readings anywhere? Which I think goes back to your point that one way to be out there is to find a place to read your work. Are there places that you go where to listen to people read their manuscripts or
Oh, I go to readings. The Columbia thesis, I haven't seen that, but yeah, I frequently will go to readings.
okay.
I'll go to bookstores or that kind of thing. Yeah,
Okay.
to listen. I sure do. And again, you don't know who you're going to meet at
Are
any.
there any, I mean, are there any specifics, venues that you could share that you go to where it would be worth one of us, one those who are listening to you, to go to, I guess, because you and other people like you would be in the room, but also we would be listening to good writing.
Yeah, well, I always think there's always interesting things going on at the KGB, the
Right.
KGB. That's why there's a reading series I like
Yeah.
in the West Village called Story Salon. It's at
Yeah.
the Hudson Square Library on Leroy
Okay.
Street. And
Okay.
that's a nice one. They usually have three readers, and what I like about it is there's always a very engaged Q&A afterwards. There's a real opportunity to meet the writers there, and it's a nice environment, and there's usually an interesting discussion that occurs around writing. So that's one I would recommend.
Okay. And I should mention KCB is one where Columbia writers read their work once a month, and I think it's being kicked off for this next season this Thursday. So that's a very specific option. Um, very last question and a short answer. Any thoughts on since we're talking about sentences,
Mhm.
uh, the impact of AI? You and I had an off
Oh
brief
boy.
conversation about
I
this.
know, we did.
Yeah,
I don't know what to say. I mean, I was
yeah,
trying to put together my slideshow, and I was saying that, Microsoft's little assistant was trying to
yeah.
offer something different. Um, who knows? I just keep trying to keep going the best that I can. I mean, I'm sure like everybody else, you get emails and pitches and things from people that
Yeah.
are written by AI, and you can tell they are. And um, we're going to have to see how it evolves and how it can be used as a tool for us in our writing. rather than taking over. I think, you know what, also people have been worried about, I'm old enough to remember people absolutely freaking out about the word processor. Do you remember this? And
Interesting.
going to be the death of writing, not to use the
Okay.
typewriter. The word processor is going to just,
Okay.
people are going to be cranking out, and people have been worried about Google, and it becomes a tool. And my hope is that likewise, AI becomes a tool that we know how to use.
Okay. And I think we'll have to leave it there with the focus on sentence making, hopefully by ourselves, maybe with a little AI, but certainly coming up with some kind of granular precision that gets us out of the slush pile. So um, Dawn has shared an awful lot of useful information tonight. If you go into the queue, into the chat, you'll find Dawn's website. If you have any further questions or you want to reach out to her for any other reason, for her editorial expertise, you'll also find the website for Columbia Fiction Foundry. And as I said earlier, we welcome you. We are about literary citizenship and helping each other become better writers. So with that, thank you very much, Dawn, for sharing that with us. Thank you very much, everyone who's in the audience. I hope this has been helpful. I felt that it was certainly useful to me. And with that, good night and have a very good rest of your evening. Okay. Bye now.
Thank you.
Thanks.